I would like to introduce our moderator for the panel tonight, Paul Shelley from Molycop. And so if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panel, you can drop those in the chat. So far, we have already questions that they're ready to answer. So we have 3 panelists with us this evening. We have Manqiu from Vale. We have Leonard Hill from Freeport-McMoRan. And we have Peter, and I apologize for your last name if I can't pronounce it well, Amelunxen from Hudbay Minerals. So welcome and thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thanks, Heidi. And welcome, panel. And we're going to have a very interesting time. The process that we'd like to take is that we've got some questions that people sent in, and so we'll go through those questions, and each one of the panelists will get a chance to speak on those questions, and then we'll reflect on that question, and then we'll move on to the next question. And people can post questions online. Just a little note on Molycop for those who don't know, we're the largest supplier of forged grinding media in the world. And we also support our customers with circuit analysis. We do a heap of research and development, and our flagship project at the moment is called P86. And this is where we insert sensors inside the grinding media and throw those inside the mill. And thus we're collecting data from inside a SAG mill. And we've got, we're well advanced in our research and collecting data there. So why don't we start with our artificial intelligence data question? So the first question to the panel, there's considerable industry momentum for artificial intelligence and data analytics, and we saw a presentation on that today from Taylor. Perhaps we've reached a stage where the industry understands how value can be created with AI and data. What is your reality? Where is value creation using AI in the context of embryonic, adolescent, or mature? What are the time horizons for each of those stages? So, Leonard, do you want to kick off the panel discussion? Thank you.
I thought you might throw that question my way. You know, I think this is a really interesting topic to start the evening off with. Excuse me. You know, we've used advanced analytics and in loading and haulage for over a decade, and we've seen some great improvement in equipment reliability and just understanding, you know, drivers' habits, and we've gotten a big improvement in fleet performance and asset efficiency out of that. And at the same time, you know, for decades we've collected data in our concentrators with our data historians and not really used it to extract the most value that we can out of it. So in 2018, one of our concentrators here in North America started using AI and data analytics. And at the same time, we adopted agile methodology. And this was a really powerful combination. I think we learned a lot about our operations, and you know, we also learned that, you know, it's when you're doing analytics on big data, you need to make sure that you've got some knowledgeable people in the room to really understand cause and effect. But we've built some really powerful predictive models, seen some really significant increases in, particularly in throughput at our operations. And you know, I'd say all in all, it's been a real success. So, you know, models are only as good as input data. So, you know, this has also included having to update a lot of instrumentation and put good programs together for calibration. And, you know, and obviously we can't turn a blind eye to process knowledge. We've got to have skilled people running the programs and interpreting the data. So I think it's given us a lot better line of sight on some of the things that matter. And in some cases, it's just opened up great communication between the mine and the mill, where we've had a lot of success around our blast fragmentation and ore delivery programs, ore blending programs. I think mining engineers are starting to understand that, you know, what mineralogy can do to recovery, and in either a good or a bad way. So, all in all, I think it's been a really positive experience for us, and it's been a profitable experience as well. I'd say that we're probably in the adolescent stage of value creation, and we've certainly seen value being added. I can't say where we're going to end up. I really can't say when we're going to reach maturity, because I'd say that we're going to have to, we don't have a line drawn in the sand to say this is what success looks like. We're just going to keep working on and improving throughput and mill performance. And I think this could be a multi-year objective that's really going to change our company culture and change the way we look at our business.
Okay, thanks, Leonard. Manqiu, do you want to make a comment, please?
I do. I know this subject because I learned about the AI just about 4 or 5 years ago when I went to a University of Toronto for a lecture, and I heard they are doing some wonderful research in this field. As a traditional mineral processor, as you were saying, that we always trying to understand the cause effect and the fundamental mechanism behind what drives the change. Apparently, this AI doesn't care. Okay, it's looking at a lot of data and looking at a lot of data output and link them and find that what drives the change. I feel that in this industry, either we can adopt the change or we will be changed. Very simple. This is evolving very rapidly. Thank you.
Thanks, Manqiu. Peter, your thoughts around this one?
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. I just want to I want to emphasize Len's point that AI has been around for a long time. I remember almost 20 years ago working on soft sensors using neural nets and expert systems and stuff like that. And I think what we're talking about now in the context of data analytics is, taking advantage of the increased computational power that's available and the network capacity and bandwidth, with cloud infrastructure and that kind of stuff. So it's a whole different platform on which we can use neural nets and adaptive algorithms and that kind of stuff. So that's one of the key things that have changed, and I think that's just going to continue to change. One of the cautions, though, I would suggest is that not every plant is ready for it. The plant, for example, that Len mentioned, I believe has been in operation since at least 1977. So it's a mature process where the operators have had more than 40 years to debottleneck it, balance the circuits, find the right reagents and liberation size, and generate a very rich history of ore characteristics and plant responses. Like our Constancia operation in Peru is fairly young. I think it's been running for about 5 years or so, and so there's a lot of opportunity at the base of the optimization pyramid. Things like optimizing the equipment, making sure the mills are charged properly, choosing the right reagent. So you should be careful implementing or trying to implement AI systems and data analytics. If the system changes, it may render your results obsolete. So there's a time and a place for it, and that would be, in my experience, for example, we've tried it twice at Constancia with limited success, mainly because the process itself needed to be focused on before we get to the top of the pyramid. So that's just a little caution I would advise to listeners. Thanks.
Yeah, Peter, I think that's wise counsel. Some of the takeaways here is that the teams told us is that the load and haul drill blast people are a little bit in front of the mineral processing people in terms of where they are in that cycle. I think we're Leonard told us that we're in this adolescent stage. We're discovering what data analytics and AI can do, and where, as a suppliers, we're discovering the value propositions. The thing that Manqiu mentioned was AI doesn't really care about the heritage engineering cause and effect type processes. It's just looking for data analytics and data patterns. And then, yeah, we just heard Peter tell us about not everyone's ready, and there's a time and a place. And my thoughts go to operators and operator control. And where they go is that we've got a continuum of systems, from manual intervention and operators running the plant to expert control systems. And I'll just re-ask the panel, based on that feedback, that we've got, you know, an adolescent type value proposition, that not everyone's ready and that AI doesn't care. You know, where do you think is the right stop on the continuum for AI and data analytics in terms of expert control system versus operator manual intervention? So, Peter, I might go back to you, since you thought that not everyone was ready.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, you know, when you start up a mill on the first day, it's not going to run properly, and you know, as you learn how the equipment behaves, you need to optimize things like the flotation agitator speed or the mill speed, the dilution water. Going back to some of Taylor's comments, you know, some plants could use some Anderson-Hauser, right? Like if you're only using 3% of your instrumentation, you know, obviously you're losing 97% of the color that your instrumentation and control system can generate. So the way I look at it, going back to the optimization period, you generally start with the equipment level optimization. As the equipment starts running, you know, runs smoother, you go to circuit level type optimization, where you're looking for bottlenecks, and you try to identify and characterize them through instrumentation and bottleneck mapping. Then you go towards process control, which is more like short horizon stabilization and short-term stabilization. Once you've got your process control systems and your historians down, then you move towards geometallurgy and more long horizon type optimization, you know, adding balls to the SAG mill if you're going to be SAG mill limited in a month from now. And then once you've kind of got that, then you're really at the top of the pyramid, and like there's not much left at the bottom of the tree, so to speak. And you start looking into things like AI and data analytics. So that's not to say that you couldn't benefit from it earlier. Like Len mentioned, that, you know, you need smart people, and, you know, often at a concentrator, having a bunch of smart people in the control room asking questions is going to lead to improved productivity anyway. But it's not necessarily a result of the AI. It's more a result of the process of implementing it. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. Manqiu, where do you think we should be in terms of operator manual intervention and expert control systems?
This is a great question. A while ago, I was involved in a startup and the commission of a new concentrator. And even though it's a relatively new concentrator, but we brought a lot of experienced operator on the side, because we know we need those experience and the support. And we run 6 to 6, so 2 shifts. Mm-hmm. Every morning I got there at 6 o'clock, everything changed. Yeah. So I was got a little bit. I said, wow, we worked so hard the evening before. We set all the parameter operation, and the next morning we came back and the set point changed. So that tells me that yes, the operator experience are very important, but they all have their own preference, bias in the way they operate, and they don't necessarily even communicate from one shift to another. And so I've been baffled by this, and we've been thinking about how can we remove that impact. Yeah. How can we move to? So we introduced obviously expert control system, but it got a lot of limitation in that fuzzy logic. So we are introducing this, we call the advanced process control, or MPC, or multi predictive control, into our operation. Still a lot of long way to go. But someday we should be able to reduce the dependency on the operator's part.
Yeah, totally agree. Data uncertainty and data variability is the death of the algorithm. So definitely resonates with me. Leonard, your thoughts on moving to the expert control system versus operator manual intervention?
You know, Peter and Manqiu made it hard for me to say much more because they the topic pretty well. But you know, I think that one thing we really need to, you know, always be conscious of is, you know, whether it's expert control or AI or, you know, any of the tools that we're talking about today, you know, we can't let them be crutches. We still have to make sure that we have operators that are trained and understand the process, and that we have process control engineers and, you know, mineral processors out in the field that are skilled and knowledgeable and experienced and have operations experience. You know, because I think a good operator, if they're sitting in the control room and that's all they're doing, you know, they can outperform expert control for a while. But as soon as there's distractions and other things that go on, you know, the computer's probably going to win if the expert control system is properly configured and you've got well-calibrated instrument and it's, you know, it's being informed with good data. So I think just looking at the trends in the mining industry and, you know, the aging workforces that we're seeing at a lot of our sites, we really need to move towards more robust expert control systems. I think that's something we have to do if we're going to maintain efficiencies and maintain competitiveness.
All right, thanks very much. That's quite topical, Leonard, because one of the questions that came in from us asking what people are interested in is around skills. So in 2008, there were 300 enrolments in mining engineering in Australian universities, which the mining universities, Curtin, University of New South Wales, Queensland. And in 2019, there were less than 20. So 300, 2008, 20, 2019. This pattern we're seeing is similar all around the world, with the exception of Chile. Where are we sourcing our next generation of miners, and what skills might they have? Leonard, I'll let you keep going. You're on topic. I'll get your thoughts.
Okay, so, you know, I look at, you know, I've actually, for the last few years, I've been leading the career development program for our mineral processors in the company. I recently handed that responsibility over to somebody else, but I'd say that, you know, if I look at our metallurgists, our people with metallurgical engineering titles that are working in that role in North America, about half of them have mineral processing degrees, and the other half are a little bit of everything else. A lot of chemical engineers. I mean, we've hired chemists and biomedical engineers and mechanical engineers, and, you know, we're looking for attitude. You know, in a lot of cases, it's like if somebody's shows an aptitude to learn and an interest in our industry, we feel like we can train them on a lot of the skills that they need. But it definitely puts them, you know, at a bit of a disadvantage coming out of school without any real knowledge of mineral processing. So we've had quite a bit of success with in-house training programs, primarily around, you know, comminution and flotation. We've been involved with another mining company and a group of third-party educators with a program called Metcelerate, and Metcelerate kicked off last summer, and it's really it's a introduction to mineral processing online course that's targeting mineral processors without mineral processing education. And I'd say that the content is really rich. I've been really happy with the content that's put together. We're about 3/4 of the way through the first cohort on that. And I think that's going to help fill the gap. But from a long-term sustainability perspective, you know, we still need universities that have knowledgeable mineral processors teaching mineral processing. You know, it's in a generation, if we don't keep filling that pipeline, you know, how are we going to know how to run our business?
Yes, here, Leonard. Really agree. Great initiative too. Your initiative. Manqiu, do you have thoughts on the skill set and where they'll come from?
Obviously, the university educated the undergraduates or graduates with mineral processing background are my better choice if I'm going to hire them for mineral processing job. In our own company, we have this group training program, which actually essentially opens to everyone who have engineering degree. Doesn't matter if it's mineral processing or materials or even nanotechnology. With the purpose, actually, purpose is to bring all different talent to the organization. And some of them are assigned to mineral processing or metallurgical process, hydropyro. Yes, I would say it's very hard to say that the education background played a huge role other than the person's appetite, the willingness to learn, adapt, that they can really put them into the right spot for the. It's something we needed to work on. Otherwise, we will not have a next generation in mineral processing.
Yeah, agreed. And Peter, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree with the two comments from Manqiu and Len. We're also looking at metcelerate here at Hudbay. We have the same problems and challenges that Len mentioned, and you know, one of the things that I guess wasn't mentioned that I'll bring up is one concept that we've been looking at is instead of trying to promote, create promote and market training courses at the university level or create training programs on site and job-based trainings. There is a third option, which would be to maybe make our operations more agreeable to attract and retain the talented engineers and technicians that we need to run them. And one example, for example, that we've done at Hudbay at Constancia is to move our control room down to the camp as a trial basis, so that all the operators now work in the same room as the dispatch operators, and that's a proof of concept program with the ultimate intention of moving the entire control room and operations teams to Lima, so that our employees can be closer to their families and just make it a more attractive work environment in general. So that's another option. It won't work for everybody, but the concept would be that at the end of the day, the plant would be staffed with a minimum crew of maintenance and instrumentation people who are just there to keep things running. So that's another option. And I think we're not the only ones, obviously, that are looking into it. I've been to several remote control rooms that are doing things similar to that, but that's an alternative.
So Peter, just tell us a bit more. So the operators are in the camp, and the control room of the SAG mill is in a room in the camp. Did I understand that?
Yeah, correct. So the camp's about a half a kilometer from the mill, and we have a central control room there, connected by fiber with the old control room and the DCS, which is still located in the mill itself. And the dispatch and control room operators all work in the same room. They can talk to each other when there's changes of shovels and ores. And the plan is to move that concept to Lima. There's a fiber set up now connecting our mill. It's a remote mill. It takes about 5 hours to drive in from Cusco, and so it's really tough to get people there. The shifts are about 7 days on, 5 days off. So it's quite inconvenient, for our to attract talent, when we're competing, for example, with Leonard Hill's operation at Cerro Verde, which is a 45-minute drive from a beautiful city named Arequipa, right?
Yeah. It's a lovely city with lovely town square there for sure. Manqiu, your thoughts on remote operating centres and you know, sharing skills via the remote operating center? Is your team moving in that direction at all?
Not in my team specific. It's actually a strategic direction of the company. They've been thinking about this for a while. And a while ago, a senior person was asking me, why can't we operate our Voices Bay concentrated from Shelley Park, city of Toronto, you know, Mississauga, just right? I said, of course, if you have the will, we can make it happen. That's been 3 years now, and not really happened yet. But there's talk about this possibility. So as Peter was saying, with a minimum number of operators on site. Probably most of them are mechanic maintenance people, so they can fix things when things are not working properly, while the majority operational control will be done remotely. That's the future direction. We've been talking about that.
And Leonard, you heading towards remote operating centers, like skill sharing via remote operating centers?
You know, we don't have the same remote challenges that a lot of our competitors do. You know,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, you know, one of our flagship operations is 45 minutes from a city of 1 million people. So, you know, that's a much different situation than, you know, some of the fly-in, fly-out operations that are
Yeah.
out there. But at the same time, even in some of our Arizona operations, you know, we have trouble attracting talent in some of the trades that have skills that can transfer out of mining. You know, if a person has an opportunity to live in Phoenix or Tucson instead of Morenci or Baghdad, you know, and make similar wages, or in some cases better wages, and be with their family every day and be where they want to live, you know, it's really to compete with that. You know, whether we're talking about engineers or electricians or, you know, diesel mechanics. So, you know, I don't really know how to resolve that with some of the trades that really need to be on site to be effective. So, but it's definitely going to be a challenge for our industry going forward.
And Leonard, do we see that if we move to a remote operating environment, that those trades, so in the operating room, may not just be an operator, it might be the plant met, the engineering maintenance guy, you know, and they're all sitting there in a remote operating room together. Is that too far forward, or is that realistic? Or what do you think? If we've got remote operating centers, why just cluster it with an operator? Why not put the team? I mean, what's your thoughts? Are we heading there?
Well, that would be a cool job.
I know.
I'm trying to imagine, you know, the training that would go into you know, developing somebody with a broad skill set like that. But I think that would be a like I said, it would be a fun job to walk into every day if, you know, if you didn't know which hat you were going to have to put on, you know, depending on the challenges that were going on in the plant at any given time. But I think we're going to have to get creative. I think, to your point, whether it's a person that does that, or if it's just, you know, something that we haven't thought of yet, we are going to have to get creative in how we manage our workforce and keep our operations going.
Yeah. Manqiu, any closing thoughts before we move on? No. Peter, any closing thoughts on that? I think we come up with some interesting stuff there around skills.
Yeah, just not to belabor the point, but I think you may be onto something. There may be a market where you have, you know, for example, a third-party service provider that offers very high-level experienced consultants who share their time among multiple clients, you know, metallurgical managers and engineers and operators out of a central office where, you know, you subscribe to the service and you can access some of the great minds in our industry on demand, and I think that may be an efficient working model for some of, especially us like Hudbay. We're not as large as Freeport, and we can have trouble because of the remoteness of our sites attracting talent. I think there may be a business model there that could be leveraged. I've spoken with some people in the industry who are considering that. It's a good point.
It is on the Molycop scenario analysis, but it's not immediate yet. So I think it's an interesting point. So let's change tact a bit, team. For gold and copper producing mines, the proportion of energy consumed through crushing and grinding processes is between 26 and 46% of the total energy consumed at the mine. Furthermore, early research at the Department of Energy in the USA indicates that comminution represents up to 2% of the world's electrical power consumption, Reducing energy, cost and carbon footprint is an industry challenge that cannot be ignored. Can we talk about your responses to the challenge? In what time frame do we see serious changes to the SABC flotation leach circuit and technology? Manqiu, I might go to you first, please.
I thought we spend more than 2% the public in comminution. I don't know. That's what I read from some reference. Yeah, energy efficiency is a big topic, and it's something very important to this industry. We've been working on optimization, improving our I call conventional comminution circuit. Even though we introduced the HPGR, nowadays we're talking about the coarse particle flotation. How about we grind much coarser, reject the majority, only regrind? But they are all essentially working, still trying to optimize the process we have, right? I think there is a group of thought that they are thinking about how about we change this process totally. Dry grinding, even in the copper ore or gold, very different technology. One of the initiatives taken on by CIMEC called conjugated our hammer mill. It's essentially like two rolls. Anyway, it's very intriguing, and they said it saves energy by 50%. If that's true, that's a game changer.
Leonard, your thoughts?
So this is interesting because I'm going to have to speak out about the reference to SABC specifically, because we've had a great deal of success with the HPGR circuit at Cerro Verde. So we've made some serious changes in grinding technology, with that operation. At the same time, this is a capital intensive industry, and for existing operations, I think we all know how difficult it is to justify replacement capital if your plant's still running. If it's fully depreciated and all you're dealing with is operating costs, and even if you've got a highly efficient option in front of you, it doesn't necessarily make economic sense. So I think that's where we face a big challenge in our industry is if we've got a 40 or 50-year-old plant that has the lowest operating cost in the company, how do we go about replacing that and doing it in a way that makes good business sense as well as good environmental sense. And then you look at companies like Boliden in Scandinavia, where they've got a lot of ag mill, pebble mill circuits, and their Aitik operation in northern Sweden, is arguably the lowest operating cost mill in the world. And so where the rest of the world seems to have lost that art, they really seem to have refined it. So there's existing technology out there that offers some benefits, but I think really we need to look at coarse particle recovery, because if we can grind coarser, we can save a lot of energy in the grinding circuit and still extract the maximum value from our resource. But that also gives us the opportunity to look at dry stack tails, because now you've got coarse material that's going to be easier to filter and easier to handle. It's going to reduce water consumption. So, I think rather than focusing on specific grinding technology, we need to look at all of the processes and understand, which process is going to drive this and drive the value. And I think coarse particle recovery that's a topic that I could probably talk about all night, because I see how important it is, but I don't, necessarily have the solution in hand either, but it's the direction we really need to go.
Yeah, Leonard, thank you. My thoughts went to, and Peter, we're not forgetting you, we'll bring you in on the conversation. My thoughts went to our industries faced with both fiscal and social challenges. And I completely accept the discussion around existing capital, but there is a social imperative coming at us that wants us to reduce energy and have less carbon footprint, etc. So I'll leave that thought hanging there, and it might be something we talk about in summary, and I'll go to Peter on the original question.
Yeah, thanks. So it's a good point. I mean, reducing energy and carbon footprint is a noble pursuit, but a mining company won't pursue that if it doesn't also reduce the cost footprint. And so the only way I think we're going to get there is if we identify solutions that are cheaper and more efficient in terms of carbon production and energy consumption. For example, the hammer mill that Manqiu mentioned, it may be advantageous to reduce the energy consumption by 50%, but not if we have to build it out of iridium and rhenium, so that it lasts long enough before we have to change the hammers on it. So there is an element of pragmatism that needs to be unwrapped as well. If we're going to talk about the social contract and social sustainability, then we also need to look at it from a pragmatic point of view, not just in terms of energy efficiency. Nevertheless, though, mining companies are going there. We're not sitting on our hands. At Hudbay, for example, we're looking at coarse particle recoveries, hybrid circuits in which we combine ag milling with HPGRs, or sulfide leaching of low-grade sand. So having two streams from a mill, and you send a low-grade sulfide to a chloride leach or a catalytic leach of some sort, while the higher-grade fines go onto a flotation. There's great engineering ideas and ore sorting technology coming out. So there's a lot of hope. But like Len mentioned, replacement capital, isn't economic, and a mining company's job is to be profitable. That's the only way we'll be sustainable. So you have to look at that. And I think sometimes the discussion gets lost in terms of what we should do from an energy point of view. So that's what I think. That said, we are building new plants every once in a while if the courts don't stop us. but the new plants we are looking at, I'm thinking of Rosemont, but the new plants we are looking at are low efficiency or low energy consumption, high efficiency, high productivity plants that incorporate all of these new concepts: coarse grinding, multi-stage grinding, ore sorting. We're looking at all of that. It's not something that we do overnight. If we're lucky, we build a new concentrator every 5 or 10 years in the United States. It's not like the airline industry where we have a new model every 3 years, or telephones where it comes out every year. We have a chance to fix our mistakes from the last one. So that's one of the challenges we have, among others.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And just a by note that Molycop does participate in the conjugate anvil hammer mill project. So we sit and try and help there. And, I think all industry has to be aware of this, the energy imperative. So just before we close it, we might have just reflections on that, where we got to. Manqiu, any further thoughts and reflections on energy and where it's at, or any further thoughts?
I think the energy, we have I think a Rio Tinto, every major mining company made the announcement by the year of 2050, we must be carbon neutral. I think it's 2050, carbon neutral.
Yeah.
2030, we are talking about the substantial amount of reduction compared to the 2017 level. So there is a huge amount of effort within our company for the greenhouse gas reduction effort. At this moment, we are focusing on scope 1, scope 2, and we are actually moving to so-called scope 3. But in scope 2, particularly this combustion circuit efficiency is being raised. So they will be looking into it. We will look into it from two perspectives. From the opportunity that can be optimized, reduce the energy with the existing equipment. I totally agree with you guys. I mean, there's no way we can just go replace a SAG mill because the other mill is slightly more efficient. That just doesn't make sense because the investment is so big. So it has to be looked after very cautiously, but it's a direction we are moving forward.
Leonard, closing comments on energy?
I think I appreciated your comment, Paul, about social license, because you're exactly right. We that has to be part of every decision we make anymore. The glorious days of capitalism are behind us. That's not a bad thing. So I think we need to find the right balance to understand where we can. I think in some cases it's going to be step changes in improvement, but if it's trying to improve a brownfield operation, and when we have opportunities to build new plants, we have to manage the risk of putting too much new technology into a process. But we have to go in with our eyes wide open and understand what the opportunities are, and probably take on more design risk than we would be willing to 10 or 15 years ago to capture some of these opportunities.
Or perhaps be more risk-seeking in innovation and technology step changes. It's a very conservative industry, and if we let ourselves go a bit, we might get there. But it's not for me to close. I'll let Peter. Peter, any more thoughts before we move on? And we've got 10 minutes for the last question. No.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be quick. One thing on the SABC circuits, I do think SAG mill circuits are here to stay. There are some ores, the soft friable ores, that are actually cheaper and lower energy to process in SAG mills. So that's just one comment. For example, Constancia is a fairly soft ore, and it's a SAG mill ball mill circuit, no pebble crushing, and I think it's one of the lowest cost operators in South America on a per ton basis. The head grade is low, but on a per ton basis, the processing cost is quite low. We also operate rod mill ball mills, believe it or not, in our Manitoba operations up in Flin Flon, which are very energy inefficient. But in Manitoba, all of the energy is renewable sourced energy from hydroelectric. So when it comes down, in spite of the fact that the circuit itself is old and inefficient, the copper is extremely green, and Hudbay has we've actually been able to leverage that in our last round of financing because we were able to sell corporate bonds to the European groups that were looking at more socially sustainable sources of base metals. So it shouldn't, don't overlook the source of the power, in the quest for energy efficiency as well. Ideally, you do both.
Investment community moves, the mining community moves. That's a industry trait. We might change tact and try and get the last one in the last 10 minutes. In most hard rock mining, we're faced with declining head grade and increasingly complex ores. We're mining more tons for potentially less recovered metal. What might the industry impact of this dynamic do in the next 5 years? Leonard, do you want to kick us off? I don't think you've started yet.
So I think one thing that we do pretty well is mine low-grade ore. But you're right. I mean, if you look at, some of our larger ore bodies, that they might have a 40 or 50 or 60-year mine life at current milling rates, but the life of mine head grade is probably 2/3 of our current head grade. So, so you've got bigger pits, you've got longer hauls, you've got lower grade. In some cases, you got harder rock at depth. So, the deck is really stacked against you for, reducing energy consumption and operating costs per pound of metal. But I think if we're going to remain competitive, since we can't set the market price for our product, we're going to have to figure out a way to be more efficient, whether, maybe it's larger haul trucks, maybe it's ore sorting at the, ore face. I don't know. I don't know what this might look like, but we do have to come up with a way to make these large established resources profitable, because the lead time and the timeline for building a new plant right now is long enough that we can't just shut these old operations down and plan on going and building a new one somewhere. So it's going to be that this is probably the biggest challenge that our industry is going to face over the next 10 years is dealing with declining grades and higher unit cost. Yeah.
Manqiu, your thoughts on the issue?
Couple things I'd like to share my personal experience on this. The first one, in all those mining projects, we use this formula NPV, which is really bad in terms of the sustainable development for the mine. Very often, the first few years, they're trying to high grade. What's left behind is really challenging low grade. In fact, also most of our operation, at least in the nickel industry anyway, it's not there just for 10 years or 15 years. It's much longer. In fact, in our Sudbury operation, it's over 100 years now. We are going deeper. Fortunately for deeper, we are getting very good grades, but it's very expensive to mine, very risky to mine. And on the other hand, we do have large open, pitable, low-grade resources. Somehow we have. I think it's the responsibility of the mineral processing community that we figure out a way to actually be able to economically process large, low-grade materials with decent recovery.
Yes. I do agree. Peter, your thoughts on this one?
So declining head grades have really been the story for hundreds of years. It's not a new trend. And I think it's been probably one of the drivers for a lot of the key innovations in our field. I'm thinking, for example, froth flotation, which made it economical to mine lower grade sulfides instead of the direct to smelter ores, from that were already rare. And so it'll continue to incentivize. The lower grades are going to incentivize innovation in our field, I think, probably as long as we do mining. One of the solutions that we've been employed, which Len can speak about, is the idea of just increasing the tonnage. Because if you're looking at minimizing the cost per ton, then by increasing the tonnage, you raise the denominator. And I think that approach is becoming more and more difficult because of the limited access to all of the other finite resources that we need to process the ore from these high tonnage operations. And I'm thinking, land to put your waste rock piles on and your tailings. We have experience with that with the permitting process from Rosemont. the availability of water, energy, people, social license. So there's a lot of other finite resources that are required to process copper. And I believe if you look at the known copper reserves, there really is a lot of available base metal, not just copper, but base metal reserves. We know where it is. We just can't really get to it because there's not a way of processing it in a sustainable manner, right? So what can you do if you can't increase the tonnage? Well, not a lot, unfortunately. You could go underground. You could wait till the metal prices go high enough so that you start looking at underground deposits or mining in more remote locations. One of the challenges we need to try to avoid, though, I think, is the concept of just throwing money at the problem, right? If generally what happens is if the copper price goes up as head grades go down, and if demand's fairly constant, then you get into a situation where mining companies have more access to capital and they tend to overinvest in the upcycle, which leads to a overextension in the down cycle and therefore underinvestment. And so then they fail to capitalize on the next upcycle, and you get into this kind of repeating cycle in which you're never really operating as well as you should be, either from an efficiency point of view or from a productivity point of view. So one of the challenges is for our mining companies to keep their eye on the long term and to invest in projects that are sustainable in all periods of the mining cycle. And having lived now through several mining cycles, I'm personally a bit skeptical that we're going to do this. But if we identify those companies that do have that long-term vision, I think those are the ones that we should keep our eye on. So that's one of the. It's not directly related to the declining head grade, but I think it's indirectly caused by it.
Yeah. Gents, we're at the time. I think Leonard's right. We could keep talking here for quite some time, but we're limited to time. The things that we've covered here is AI and data analytics, energy, and where that's going, the skills shortage, the declining head grades. It's true that it's not a new issue, and we owe quite a lot to the malachite miners of the Middle East who started throwing copper into fire. And I think we've come a long way since then. Heidi, we didn't get to a lot of the questions online. We apologise for that. But I really do want to thank the panel, a very esteemed panel, and some really fantastic insight from the big miners. And so thanks very much, guys.
Yes, thank you so much. And I was going to ask if it would be possible. We did get a lot of interaction in the chat, a lot of comments and a lot of questions. So we thought if you gentlemen were willing, we would share those questions with you all. And if you had any responses, you could send them to us. And then when we send the outcomes out, we can share your answers. So thank you, Paul, very much for moderating. There's only so much we can do at GMG. We really have to hand it over to our experts when it comes to this type of thing. So thank you for moderating, and thank you to our three panelists for your time and your expertise. As I said, we had a lot of action in the chat, so I know that this is a topic that a lot of people would like more knowledge on, or have questions for you experts in the field. So thank you very, very much.